Hello everyone, and welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. I wanted to do a video on my thoughts on the sale of the Super Mario Bros. Factory sealed, rare sticker sealed, graded game that sold for $100,150 on February 6th of this past year by Heritage Auctions. I did write an article for Antiques and Auction News on this, and normally what I'm trying to do is when I create these videos, I'm trying to do differing topics than what I talk about in my articles. There is some overlap, as you can see, if those of you that watch all of my videos and also read my articles, which I do write for Antiques and Auction News. You can read my articles. They come out every 2 weeks on a Friday at www.antiquesandauctionnews.net. If you are interested in pursuing what I write as well as what I create via YouTube. This YouTube channel was just launched this June, literally. I think early June I launched this YouTube channel. So I'm slowly making videos and trying to ramp up some of the topics that I want to talk about. But I did want to discuss this one topic in particular, especially given right now that a lot of my topics are based on vintage video game collecting and where the hobby's going. I thought that this would be a good segue into remaining on that topic for a little bit. So I want to put this in perspective, and I caution a lot of collectors, speculators, and unsophisticated investors operating in the antiques and collectibles trade not to put too much emphasis on the sale. In this video, I'm going to give you my reasons why, and I'm going to expand on a lot more than what I wrote about just in my article that premiered in the March 22nd, 2019 issue of Antiques and Auction News. That said, before we begin, I have to say that I have tremendous respect for everyone involved in both the buying and selling of this item. I don't want this video to be misconstrued. I do a lot of business with Heritage Auctions, especially on the coins and currency end. I do business with Wada Games. Those of you that saw my other video where I look at the grading differences between VGA graded games and Wada Games, no, in that video I had several specimens graded by Wada Games, who I think does an excellent job. I have no qualms with them. I have no qualms with the seller, the buyer, anybody on that end. I just want to put that out there before I begin, because a lot of this criticism that I'm going to say surrounding this sale is a little bit harsh, but it should not be intended at any one individual, any entity, or anybody involved in this sale. So now that that's out of the way, I can finally give my feedback. What people don't seem to realize about the sale of this item is, the first thing is, it was sold by somebody who, and I want to put this out there, I greatly respect the person that sold the item, the item in question, okay? He was a well-known collector, very knowledgeable in the vintage video game marketplace. He has as much knowledge as me on the subject of vintage video games, if not more. And for that, I give him all the credit in the world. You know, he went out there, he took a risk, he bought the item, and the item did accelerate in value because obviously he sold it for much more than what he paid for it. So on that note, I have nothing against the seller who sold this item. I want to put that out there, okay? The problem that I have with this is I feel that even though all parties were transparent in the sale of this item, meaning Heritage Auctions was transparent in the sale price, there's lots of articles on the internet, and you can research these. I'm not going to name names or go into detail over who the buyer was, or the buyers, I should say. I'm going to get to that in an upcoming point for this item, and also who the seller was. I encourage you to use Google search, go right out there and start looking at the facts of the sale, because a lot of that's going to help make sense to what I'm about to say in this video. Okay, first up, it is my understanding that the seller of this item wanted at least $100,000 for the item in question, okay? And the item sold for $100,150. So he got $150 more than what he was asking for the item. The problem that I see for those of you that know the higher end auction business, okay? And what I'm referring to that is Sotheby's, Heritage, Morphe Auctions can even be put in there, I think now. They're out of Adamstown, Pennsylvania, but they've grown so much that I would put them almost in that category, if not a little bit lower. but they're almost on par with a Heritage at this point. They just don't yet have the brand recognition for those outside of the trade that Heritage Auctions does. But that'll come in time, I really think. That said, when somebody consigns something to an auction house and the market value is believed to be a significant amount, and there's a lot of demand for that item, it's trending, people want it, okay? The auction house will promote that item, and what they'll do is they'll assign a minimum opening bid for the item. Usually that minimum opening bid is based on the estimate price of the item. So in this case, if they expect an item to go for $100,000, they'll open the bid at maybe $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000. It's usually not more than 20% of the item's expected market value. So in this case, if they thought this game was going to sell for $100,000, Heritage should have, in all honesty, in my opinion, should have started the bid at $20,000 and let it buyer demand and enthusiasm push it to $100,000 or wherever it ends up. Maybe it ends up at $110,000, $120,000. Maybe it ends up on the lower end, $90,000, $80,000. You never know, okay? In this case, and I don't think too many speculators and investors looking at the sale realize, the auction started at close to $100,000, okay? It was not opened at a lower amount than that number. Now, to be fair, there is a such thing as reserved price auctions where if you're a seller, you can say, well, I'll only sell this if it comes out to the specified price that I want to specify. You can do this on eBay. You can do this with auction houses in particular, but most are very picky about doing that. So in this case, I just want to point that out, that this item, there was nothing what I call normal or copacetic about how this was listed. It was already listed at an exorbitant price, the price that the seller wanted to meet initially. There was no lower opening bid that's commonplace on items like if you have a couple $1 million coin that sells for millions of dollars. Normally they're going to open that at a much lower bid, and enthusiasm and demand for that item is going to push it up. Okay? That's how you get into bidding wars on auctions, and that's how people end up overpaying. This case, that wasn't the case. I also want to caution people, you have to look at who the buyers on the other end were who bought this item, okay? It was not just one buyer, okay? One of the buyers was actually the person who started Heritage Auctions from the beginning. So this was, I'm going to call it an inside sale, but in all honesty, and I want to put this out and I want to stress this point, there was nothing unethical or non-transparent about this sale. I want to protect all parties because I do feel that they weren't trying to create smoke screens to cause the price to accelerate to a new high. That wasn't how the sale went down, okay? There was nothing unethical or uneasy about it. It was all out there. There's a lot of articles on the internet you can read about who bought the item. You can even read about who sold the item, okay, if you know where to look, all right? So I don't want to disparage any parties. I also don't want to disparage Wada Games, although I did find it I was a little bit taken back when I submitted games to them and saw on their website, oh, if you're here because of the sale of the $100,000 Super Mario Brothers, there may be delays because we're getting inquiries on that. They said something like that on their website, which I thought was a little marketing ploy that was creative on their end. I don't think that the average person is calling up Wada Games because they graded a game that sold for $100,000. And if they are, they're not too intelligent because they're not analyzing this from the standpoint that I am. And that's why I'm creating this video, to put the unbiased truth out there, okay? And again, to be fair, Wada Games did nothing wrong. If I owned a third-party grading company and I was starting out and one of my items caught the attention of sellers that paid a certain significant amount for the item, I would put something like that on my website as well. There's nothing unethical about that, okay? But now we got to take a little bit deeper look because I'm seeing a lot of incorrect and inaccurate postings on, I'm going to just say it, mainly online video game collecting forums from very unsophisticated investors and low-level speculators in the trade. And actually, that's why I have this item right here to show an example when we get to that point. I'm going to explain. Just because a very rare sticker-sealed copy of Super Mario Brothers, which for those of you that don't know, this is not a copy that was readily available on store shelves, even in 1985. This was a copy that was available when the test market units of the original Nintendo Entertainment System were available only in New York and Los Angeles of the United States when it was first released, when it was first test marketed. That's how rare this item is. There's very few of these in existence. For this to come back from Wada Games in a 9.4, which is near mint, if you watch my other video where I compare VGA grading versus Wada game grading, you'll see the differences, and that's Wada Games version of near mint, whereas this is an 85 plus on VGA scale, this is a near mint plus. This is actually graded higher, and if we were comparing apples to apples, this is actually graded higher than the Super Mario Brothers game that sold for $100,150 because VGA uses a different grading scale. This is a near mint plus. The Wada Games item that sold is a 9.4 standard near mint. Just want to put that out there, okay? That said, a lot of speculators are incorrectly correlating this sale and its impact on the vintage video game market. So let me use this as an example. Let's say that you're a person my age. You're over 35. You're already established in your career. You have investments, real estate, and you go, you know what? I really have a nostalgic attachment towards a lot of the early Nintendo games. So you go, I'm really looking, I have the money, I want to buy a graded copy of The Legend of Zelda, okay? Gold edition that came out, 1987, and I want it in either VGA 8.85, which is their near mint plus, or I want it in Wada Games 9.4, which is their standard near mint. And, you know, I have a couple grand to spend and I'm willing to buy that. And you come across this article and you see that a rare Super Mario Brothers game sold for over $100,000. You cannot sit there and go, well, the purchase I'm going to make is an investment and it's justified because this rare Super Mario Brothers game sold for over $100,000. The Legend of Zelda Gold Edition, even though it is the more desirable version, because those of you that know vintage video games know that Nintendo also released a Grey Cart version of The Legend of Zelda, stamped it in the Classic series, and it came out later in the Nintendo Entertainment System's life, right before the Super Nintendo came out, as a last-ditch hurrah to sell more copies of the game, okay? Well, that said, most people want the gold version of Legend of Zelda, okay? I have to caution people, though. They made millions upon tens of millions of copies of that gold edition of Zelda. And if you think because it's factory sealed and in near mint condition makes it rare, you are incorrect. There were a lot being hoarded as well. I can tell you that for a fact. There's not as many as you would think because, again, back in 1985, 86, 87, even the early 90s, collecting factory sealed video games was not a big thing. I do know several people who I'm friends with, even myself, who had opportunities in the 90s to buy mass quantities of factory sealed Nintendo games. A lot of the early, well, I don't want to say early, but a lot of the later, like Metroid, Kid Icarus, Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, Super Mario Bros. 2, RC Pro-Am, Final Fantasy, Faxanadu, a lot of those games that are now highly sought after were available in mass quantities in the 1990s factory sealed. That's why there's a lot of these games out there, okay? You cannot compare a game like a factory sealed Legend of Zelda that was sold on store shelves from 1987 to 1990, where they made millions of copies, to a very rare sticker sealed limited edition Super Mario Brothers game of this caliber. They're in two separate markets, okay? That would be the equivalent of me sitting here telling you today, and this is completely false, what I'm about to say, that you should buy current generation factory sealed video games, get them graded, because one day they're going to be really rare and sought after, much like this Super Mario Brothers game. That is completely false. And there's a lot of speculators that are incorrectly correlating these items and vintage items, and they're trying to justify paying heavy amounts on the secondary market for them by utilizing this sale as a segue to that. That is complete malarkey. Do not listen to those people. You are dealing in different markets in the same antiques and collectibles category. Let me use this as an example. For those of you that know anything about vintage Star Wars figures, vintage Star Wars figures are an excellent collectible. They're starting to separate in value from other types of collectibles in that same category. Let me explain what I mean. Let's say that you want to buy a 12-back. That's one of the first figures that came out in 1977. Card it. C-3PO, Princess Leia, name your favorite character that's part of the 12-back line. And you want it near mint condition, graded by AFA in 85 or 90, okay? Which would be near mint plus. The amount of items produced in 1977 were substantial, okay? They were in demand because most people bought them as toys and collectibles second. So most people open these items, let's be honest, okay? That said, let's say you also have your eye on a rare prototype Boba Fett rocket firing action figure, of which there were only a handful of examples that left the factory, and you want one AFA graded in 85 condition or above. Recent sales of a rocket firing Boba Fett prototype action figure in AFA 85 or above are now at, we're reaching monumental heights with these items. We're talking $80,000 or above, okay, if you want one. You cannot compare that rocket firing Boba Fett prototype figure to your standard 12-back figure, even if it's factory sealed in near mint condition, because that was sold at retail and that was kept on store shelves for at least 2 years before the next wave of Star Wars action figures, called the 20-backs and the 21-backs, appeared right before the release of Empire Strikes Back. Okay? There's two different markets, and all antique and collectible categories have multiple markets within the subset of the market they portray. In other words, if you want to talk coins, there's a big difference between someone like me or someone else who's looking for an 1881 Carson City Morgan silver dollar that's graded by PCGS in 66 condition, which will probably sell in the market between $1,200 and $2,000, versus someone going out looking for a very rare coin of which there's only a handful of known issues that's going to sell for a couple mil, okay? Just because one coin sells for a record-breaking sum at auction, does that mean it automatically affects the value of lesser valued coins in that same auction, in that same environment, okay? What a lot of speculators are doing wrong is they're looking at this sale and they're going, wow, this is going to cause a lot of people to come into the market, and they're all going to want vintage video games. They're going to want modern slabbed video games. That is completely false. The type of buyer that is going after this type of item is at the high end of the market. Chances are this type of person is looking at it solely from an investment standpoint, which if you look at who the buyers of the sale are, they are, and they're comparing it to other items. Chances are this person also cross-collects. So most likely this person has graded comic books of a very high caliber, graded coins, graded currency, or other pop culture related collectibles, or historic items such as manuscripts, rare documents, or really rare movie posters from like the Universal Monsters line from the 1930s, 40s, stuff of that nature, okay? So I just want to caution a lot of the speculators, investors, and hardcore collectors who are looking at some of these sales, or even looking at like a loose stadium event that's graded by Wada Games that sells for, 15, 20 grand. You have to be very careful that you're not assuming that your copy of Snow Brothers that's loose, sitting in your collection, you don't sit there and go, well, that's going to cause demand for this item to go up. The two are not related. In your mind they are, because they're part of the same collecting category. But the buyer buying those items are operating in two different markets within that category, okay? I hope this video helps clarify why I caution a lot of people to not buy the hype when sales like this are announced, or when new record-breaking auction sales are published by the media or even the mainstream media like CNBC, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, any of your major networks that put out news media based on those sales, okay? If you like my content, I implore you to look at some of my other videos. Like, comment, subscribe. Even if you disagree with me, you're welcome to. You're wrong, but you're welcome to in this instance. Feel free to put a comment. I'll gladly look at it and review it. Gladly, I'll give you my thoughts. Again, thank you. I look forward to producing more content for you guys, and I thank you for watching. Enjoy your day.